Hello everybody, I'm going to do a video here on this Crosman 766 American Classic pellet slash BB gun. I was given this for Christmas. I believe I was 9 years old, maybe 10. And I found this at my folks' house years and years later. This was manufactured, I believe, from 1981 to 1983. This particular 766. This would be considered their phase 3. But I got it back, and you know, it has some problems with the seal. It's not pumping up properly. And I hadn't seen many videos, or any for that matter, on this particular model to take it apart, how to fix certain things, and put it back together. You know, getting the parts really easy. Getting it back together is kind of finicky. You have to get everything just right. So I'm going to go through this. I don't have my parts here yet. I did order them from Crosman, and I believe I paid about $16 for the parts to my door, and that's going to consist of a new cup seal that goes in the pump itself, another little seal somewhere, the spring in here for this little lever. When I was that age, somehow I just totally destroyed that spring. It's very hard to get this back. And trying to get that back, the little BB pusher here, I've kind of hurt that as well. So I ordered one of those. A little bit of pellet gun oil. I think that's about it. I don't have the parts yet, as I said, you know, so I'm going to go ahead and start taking this thing down and show you how to get it apart in confidence. And, you know, I'm going to start, you know, right up in here. But we're going to tear it down. Once I get my parts, I'll of course put them in, and then I'll show the reassembly. Before I get into taking this down, this particular model, this 766 American Classic, to my knowledge, has been replaced by the 2100, which I believe is still in manufacture to date. And I looked at the exploded view diagrams of the parts breakdown on both of these rifles, and best to my knowledge, through my eyes, they are identical. All the parts are exactly the same. You know, don't quote me on that, but I believe that's what you would find. So if you have a 2100, this would probably apply to you as well. You know, I just wanted to note that. And if you're having a problem, you know, with the pumping lever not pumping up, it could be one of a couple of different things, but in my case it's definitely the cup seal. And you know, I took the cup seal out and kind of reformed it a little bit to where I could pump it up, and it held air, so that means the valve inside, in mine anyway, is fine. But if you are pumping up and you're losing air after you pump it up, more than likely it's the valve inside that is the problem, because this pump itself does not retain the air. This will become clear a little bit later. So anyway, I'm going to start getting into taking this down. Let's just say, for example, this first section is you only need to replace the cup seal. It'll be a very quick R&R on that. You don't even have to take the receiver down for that. So this may or may not show up properly. I'm sorry. It doesn't matter where I put lights and what I do. I just cannot quite get things lit up. I think that's a problem, a fault in my camera. But you'll see here on this particular plastic cover here, there's one screw. I'm just going to take out the screw, and I'm going to try to, I'm shooting real close, I'm going to try to keep my tools away from the camera. And there'll be a small nut on the back side. Just toss that aside. And you can just lift this off, and there's the screw we just loosened up. And then I'll also take the bottom side out. And I'm just going to go ahead and flip the gun over here. And hopefully you can see this roll pin right here that's been driven down in here. I've got just 2 blocks of 3/4 inch wood. I'm just catching the edge of this and making sure the roll pin is on the inside. And I'm actually going to use a 7/32 roll pin punch. If you're not familiar with what a roll pin punch is, it's just a punch that has a rounded tip on it, and that is to put in here, and it'll actually hold itself and not deform that. If you just have a regular punch, 7/32, you can use it, but this is what I would recommend. And like I said, I'm going to drive this out, and it's going to get loud here, so just bear with me. I'm going to try not to touch the camera. I'm really close. And by the way, before you do this, make sure it's unloaded. Have all the BBs, you know, or a pellet out of it. Make sure there's no gas in the cylinder, you know, so cycle the action once, pull the trigger, make sure it's empty. But in my case, since it wasn't pumping up, it is empty. Okay. So now I've just driven out that roll pin right there. I'm just going to set it aside. And at this point, since I'm still in the frame, there's a plastic piece in here. I'm just going to pull it out. Just a little end cap. Alright, well, we just removed that roll pin. So at this point in the game, just turn the rifle up, raise your lever, and this whole assembly will just slide out the end. And this is the actual cup seal right here on the end of this. You can kind of examine things. Everything on mine looks good. This is a felt washer to hold your pellet gun oil. And to get the seal out of here, you just get a little aggressive with it and kind of turn it and work it out. And there we go. And in my case, this seal right here is the problem. It's, in all the years, it's just getting hard. It's not real pliable, so as it's going down here to make a compression stroke to force air into the cylinder, it's just simply not working. So I believe this part was, I don't know, about $1.15 for this. So if this is your only problem, this is actually as far as you need to take the weapon down, what I just showed. If that is the only problem, get a new seal, pop it in, put it back together, put your roll pin back in. The roll pin gets equally spaced. It'll stick out a little bit on either side. Just push it in there to where it's about equally spaced side to side. Put your cap back on. You're done. You're really done. So you don't even have to go into the receiver to do that. So now let's start getting into the receiver to take it down even further. Like I said, I apologize for the light here, but this is the best I can do. Now what you're going to find on the left hand side of the gun from the back, you're going to have 3 regular screws in here. And what I'm going to do is just kind of move my blocks and just kind of brace up the weapon the best I can, like so. And I'm going to take these 3 out. And when I'm taking them out, I'm always applying a pressure down on this side of the receiver to make sure it does not just come apart. And I'll explain that here in a moment. So there's 2, and here's the 3rd one. Okay, I'm going to squeeze this together, but right up around in this arena, there's going to be a spring right underneath here, and it may get away from you. So I just want to make sure that when I have this here, I'm just kind of holding my hand up there and working this apart. And you can see I've just taken the top of that receiver off, or 1/2 of it. And hopefully you can see right here is the spring I'm talking about. I'm just going to get under there and just slowly work that spring out. And you can see that spring right there. Make sure you don't lose this and set that aside. Underneath that spring will be a little aluminum piece, like so. There's a conical side that's bigger than the other side. That will go down. This will become clear later as we go back together. I'm going to go ahead and pull this spring out here, and this, I forget what they call it, BB something. This particular little pin right here is supposed to be canted forwards. And over the years, you can see my spring is just really torn up. That's something I did when I was 10, 11 years old. I finally ordered a new one. these are two of the parts I did order, as well as that cup. So once we get in this area, there's another spring down here on the trigger release. You might call it a sear, I'm not real sure. I'm just going to pop it up with a screwdriver and work that out and set that aside. And from that point you can go ahead and take out this pin right here, which has this, so I'm going to call it a sear or a release, I'm not real sure. Set that aside. Okay, we can also take the stock off, pull it up, set that aside. You notice this thing right here just popped out, this retainer. Pull that aside. Down in there is a spring right here, just set that aside. And from this point, this is the actual forearm catch, to where when you close it, it just catches here. You can set that aside as well. And then we'll start taking this out. There's the pump tube. We're going to come back into this in a minute. I'm going to go ahead and take the first part of it down up here. This plastic piece right here just lifts straight out like so. Set it aside, and then we're pulling up on the barrel and the bolt slide. I'll put that back on there. So you can just set this aside, and at this point the barrel would actually come out, the inner barrel. Set that barrel aside, and this is actually the barrel itself in my opinion, and that's all we need there. Set that aside, and the only thing really left in here is this one particular pin, and I guess this is part of the safety release catch here. I'm just going to leave that in place and set it aside. So moving back down into this area, you know, we took that spring and that retainer out the back. You can just pull this piece straight out, set that aside, and that's all that's in that end. Now the actual container that holds the air is right down in here, and I'm going to go ahead and push mine out just so you can see what it is. And I'm just going to carefully use the barrel itself. Coming in from the back side, kind of hung up there for a second, and there it is. This is the part that actually holds the compressed air. This supposedly I have not taken apart, and I'm not going to on mine, but this should screw apart, and there'll be a series of maybe some O-rings and a washer or something in here, seals of some kind that can be changed. There is an O-ring on the outside, and there is one small seal in this hole right here, which I did order a new one, because that is the one that actually seals the actual barrel or passageway to this. It's not that I necessarily needed one, but it was just another $1 or so, so I went ahead and picked that up. But this does hold air on mine, and I pumped it up. And one way to check this, I guess, is I did get the cup seal to where it was working, like I said, by just kind of pressing this out with my hands, and I pumped it up to about 10 pumps, and I let it sit overnight. And when I came out the next day, I worked the bolt action to where the trigger would be effective. I pulled the trigger, and I did get a blast of air out the front, so that tells me this is actually sealed up tight and still working after all these years. So just something I'm not going to get into, but if you try that test and wait a while and you do not get a blast of air, more than likely you have a problem with this valve assembly here. I believe you can buy the entire valve assembly or just buy some components inside that you need, but that's just an FYI. So we now have the rifle 100% disassembled, and at this point, like I said, I'm waiting for my parts, and once I get my parts, I'll show how this thing goes back together and actually, show how it pumps up. Well, I've decided I was going to go ahead and put this back together with the bad parts that I have because I don't know when they're going to arrive, and I've got this thing spread out all over my bench, and I don't want to, you know, lose anything. So I'm going to go ahead and put it back together as is. And to start with, get the tube, the compression tube, and then get your valve. And you're going to notice that there's a big hole right here. We want this valve to be oriented to where it lines up with that hole. So basically what I'm going to do is hold this on the top, and I'm going to start inserting this with that hole on the top as well. And I'm going to start pushing it in here carefully, and then I'm going to turn it over. Now I'm going to use the barrel itself to push this down. You know, you might want to use a wooden dowel or something like that, but this is just what I'm going to do. So I'm just going to start pushing it in, as you see, and going down here to where it gets past what I can see. And then I'm going to flip it over and start watching this hole as I push it in. And we're going to get right there. You can see we're almost perfect. So we want this to be perfect in that hole, so I'm just going to take the punch and just kind of rotate that around to where it is perfectly aligned, and then push this barrel down in there one more time just to make sure I'm seated, and I am. So at this point you can go ahead and flip it, or actually we don't need to. At this point we're going to take this particular piece, sorry I don't know what it's called, stick it in here like so. That's good. Set this aside for a moment. Now we want to take the barrel itself and stick it in the outer barrel like so. And then you're going to take this particular piece here and slide it in there to where it covers up this slot the way it was, where you put in your pellets or check for your BBs. Then turn it over about like this. Now we're going to take this plastic piece and we're going to stick it on here to where it matches up. You can see that. Now you kind of have to be careful here, but to where things don't fall apart. I'm taking this, and now you can see that I have this hole right here and this hole right here. This is going to go together, but you want this pin down in this plastic slot. So I'm just holding these together. Like I said, you kind of have to fiddle with it. But now these are together. And I'm going to drop this whole assembly down in there carefully. Kind of like that. And you have to kind of mess around with this a little bit. There's a spot where it will fall right there, and it'll fall over a standoff that's in there. And I kind of need to support the other end of my barrel, so let me put something under here, kind of hold this up. Now everything's kind of being held in there like so. Now we have this large spring right here that's going to go down into here, and you want it into that hole. And then we have this retainer that goes in there. I'm going to push it in there and line up the hole, and this may or may not pop out a little bit. Just trying to get it in there like that, and it is being held. You know, you have to kind of keep your hands on things or they're going to want to come loose. This is kind of an issue with this. Now I'm going to go ahead and put in my janky spring here, and you may not even need to take this out on yours, but you know, there it is. It's not going to lay in there properly, and it may not even line up, but that's what we've got. Okay, so I'm holding here on these two fingers, and I'm taking this catch here that holds the forearm closed and just setting it right in here, just like that. Hopefully that shows up. Now I'm still holding right here. We need to put in the trigger release. So I'm going to go ahead and start this with this pin right here. And you kind of have to work things around and let your barrel come up a little bit. Like so. Like that. And this popped out, obviously. You kind of have to fight it, but you can do it. Got to get this back in there. This is where it's, you know, kind of difficult to put this back together, but you can do it. You know, it helps if you have another set of hands or something to help you, but, you know, we can do it this way. Now we have this larger spring here, what actually goes under that trigger release, or the sear, whatever. I just lost it. Sorry about that. I'm in a small shop and it took me 5 minutes to find that guy. Careful with the springs. I'm going to try this again. You kind of have to fish it underneath here and work it with your fingers and make sure you don't lose it like I just did, and then push everything back down. And you know, it'll hold itself in there once you get it in. Okay, so from that point we have this little aluminum pin here with the conical side. It actually goes down right in here. I mean, it's hard to see and I cannot tilt this up, but it goes right down in this particular hole right there. You see that? And that happens to be where this tiny spring goes on the top. And this is the one that, you know, would be harder to find, but you just have to kind of be careful and get it down in there, and it will stay. But like I said, you know, hold down on everything at this point. I'm going to carefully release because I have it propped up right. So at this stage, we have everything installed internally in the mechanisms. We can put the stock back on. Oh no. I'm going to have to kind of reposition things. Sorry about this. Put the stock on. Hopefully you can still see what's going on. And now we're ready to put on the other half of the receiver. And the easiest way to do this is make sure your safety is in the safe mode, and that'll kind of help register this together. So take a last glance, make sure everything is looking good, which it is in my case. Seems okay. And I'm just going to set this on here carefully. You kind of have to work with that safety. Yeah, safety kind of got out on me. So I'm just going to take a screwdriver down in the slot and kind of push it over if I can. There we go. Okay. Everything is now in place. It's looking good. Now's the time to put in the 3 screws. Sorry about the camera there. And again, you know, I'm holding pressure down with my hand here just to make sure everything stays together. Okay, let's take a quick look. Looking good. Alright, so now we're ready to do the end and put the pump back. Alright, well, we're hitting the home stretch now. Let me go ahead and bring in my pump assembly here. And like I said, you know, I'm using an old seal, you know, but you would get the new one and just simply work it in there and push it, and it'll pop into place like so. So at this point, I'm going to start feeding this down in here. Like that. And I'm going to go ahead and close this down and pull it in. Now, I can feel it's got a little bit of pumping there, and this may be a different story with a brand new seal. You know, you may have to actually put this together with it open. You may not be able to push it in with it closed like I just did. You know, just an FYI there. I don't know yet. I hadn't been there. So I'm going to bring my blocks of wood back down the way we did have them. And we have this piece of plastic we need to insert in there. And it is different on both sides. You know, you have to kind of pay attention. If you look at it here, you can see that there's a slot opening on the front, and on the other side it's closed in. That slot opening is going to go down, you know, towards the bottom of the gun. So when you raise this out, it has room there. So now we're getting ready to start that roll pin back in, and it is going to get loud again, but you don't just want to drive it through, you know, with brute force. You want to check your work along the way, because once we get past this steel, we're going to start going into plastic. Then, excuse me, then we have to go through the series of 2 holes and out the other side. So basically I'm going to start it in there and slowly take it in into where this catches. And then I'm going to drive it in a little bit further until this hole catches. Then I can drive it through the rest of the way. So, you know, be careful with this. You don't want to tear things up at this stage. So I'm going to start the pin like so. I've already caught the plastic. Everything's looking good, but you can see I have not caught this portion yet. So I'm going to go in slowly. And now you can see I've caught that. So now I'm going to take it in some more. And I'm checking. I'm getting ready to come out the other side. Everything's looking good. And I've about flushed up. Now I'm going back to the edge, and I've got my finger under here. I'm just trying to gauge. Like I said, we wanted to split this a little bit more. A little bit more. And there, I'm about equally spaced coming out either end. So at this stage, we're ready to put our covers back on. And the covers will actually index the barrel. There is a hole for the roll pin right here. This is actually the bottom one. So, and it is the one that has a hex slot in it, or a hex hole to hold that nut. So I'm just going to put this on here and kind of rotate things around until it snaps on. Just like so. I'm going to go ahead and stick my nut up in that hole on the bottom and hold it with my finger. Kind of lost everything there. That looks alright. I'm going to stick the top on. This is pretty self-explanatory, but we're doing it anyway. And that's it. I'm going to go ahead and do one anyway, since this is a bad seal. It is unloaded. I got no air. There's 3 pumps. Tiny bit of air, but nothing what I should get with 3 pumps with a new seal. So I hope this helps you guys out on the 766 American Classic, as well as the 2100 on how to do it. You know, you might be wondering, I don't think I mentioned it, but you might be wondering why, you know, I invested, you know, $19 and change or so to the door for parts for this old gun. Well, old farts like me, this old gun was my first true shooter. You know, every nick and scratch on this thing came from me when I was 10, 11, 12, 13 years old. You know, so this has a lot of sentimental value to me, this particular gun. Yes, I could go out and buy a brand new one for $60 plus tax, but that's not the point. You know, this video is to how to service the 2100 and the 766, maybe to help you guys bring them up, or guys like myself who want to rejuvenate their rifles when they were a kid. So I hope this helps you guys out. I can't show the after effect because I do not have my parts yet, but I can tell you it's going to work great. Thanks for watching, and good luck.